Executive Committee, June 14th, 2019.
Committee meeting to order Friday, June 14th. First on the docket is approval of meeting minutes. Any comments, questions? Otherwise, look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Weigh in with your devices.
Oh, that's right.
Or not.
Everybody.
All those in favor? Opposed? Reflect. Motion passed unanimously. Public comment. You got anything?
None.
Negative. Any member comment? Negative. Moving on. Number 3, review of draft board agenda. Victoria. Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, we wouldn't know who you are without that name tag.
So for the July 12th board policy agenda, we have item number 1, which is public comments, communication member comments, followed by item number 2, which is the policy advisory committee chair's report, followed by item number 3, which is the report from the executive director. Under reports, we have item number 4, which is the regional assessment of employment centers, which will be presented for information, followed by the draft regional housing needs assessment methodology and allocation, which will be seeking and accept. Any questions on, I skipped, that's the July 12th board policy agenda. And then, if it's okay, I'll move on to the June 28th board business agenda. For that one, we have item number 1, which is approval of the meeting minutes, followed by public comments, communication member comments. Item number 3 is the policy advisory committee chair's report, followed by the executive director's report. Under consent, we have approval of proposed solicitations and contract awards, followed by item number 6, which is the policy advisory committee actions. Item number 7 is coming up from the transportation committee. It's the Transportation Development Act triennial performance audits, and we're seeking an approve, followed by item number 8, which is the report to the legislature on the public transit for AB 805. Item number 9 is the delegation of approval for administrative modifications for the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. So we're trying to get all of our projects in line in lieu of the passage of the RTP next November. With that, we have item number 10, which is the FY 2020 claims for Transportation Development Act and State Transit Assistance. This is for an NCTD. We're looking for an adopt. Followed by item number 11, which is the annual review of committees and working groups, which you'll be seeing on your agenda today. Item number 12 is the executive director delegated actions, followed by item number 13, which is meetings and events attended on behalf of Sandag. Under your reports, we have item number 14, which is the 2019 Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee Annual Report. This will be presented by the ITAC Chair for information, followed by item number 15, which is the proposed final 2020 program budget. Item number 16 is the 2019 Grant Anticipation Notes Issuance Review and Draft Documents. This is the final component for the financing of the Mid-Coast Corridor project. Followed by item number 18, which is the I-5 Boyd Drive Improvements Project, which is coming straight to the board due to time, where we'll be looking to incorporate some funding from UCSD. Item number 19 is a closed session item, which is related to the Los Penasquitos Bridge project. Any questions on the June 28th board business agenda?
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I have a question on item 9. The I don't quite understand. Delegation of approval for administration modifications to the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. I don't need the whole board report. What's a synopsis of that? What's the request?
So the request, it will be brought to the Transportation Committee as well, and it went to ITAC this week. Basically, it's to ask for delegation from the state to Sandag to approve administrative modifications for the RTIP. So these are small changes to the RTIP, things that are less than 40% of the total budget, that would be delegated to Sandag to make that approval.
Okay, but you say it's coming to transportation?
Yes.
Oh, good, I guess I'll see it. All right, I'll see it twice then. And then I guess on the agenda itself, though, I had an opportunity this, I don't know, last week or so, and saw the Sandag Roadshow came to San Marcos. And so I went and I saw that, and it was good. It was well presented, but you know, it kind of struck me at the roadshow was that you know, they asked the council, say, what do you think? And I thought, well, that was nice. But we really never, as a board here, have vetted the 5 big moves. I mean, it was presented on April 26th, and it was set as an information item. But we, as a board, never really weighed in on yay or nay. And now, with the presentations that are part of the roadshow, is these are the building blocks for moving forward with the RTIP. Yet the board has never taken a position or vetted those. And to me, it's, you know, everybody knows my opinion, it's a little bit heavily transit-oriented, and not enough, no highways in it. But so I'd like to see that agendized for the board to discuss and see, and we approve these 5 big moves, because we haven't.
If I may, Chairman?
We haven't. Sure.
Of course, we can agendize anything you want us to discuss, but there is nothing for you to take action on. 5 was still an idea, a presentation. The same presentation that we did in San Marcos and many other cities is the same that in 26. There's more detail. Be happy to, but we're not planning to go for action. We're not asking.
Well, if those are the building blocks for the RTP, I think the board should weigh in on those. That's
will be used.
So I would make that motion to have that, I don't know if you need a motion or whatever, to make that item a discussion item for our next
So
board meeting.
you just want to talk about, okay, are these the appropriate building blocks?
Yeah, and if we want to change, we want to add, are these, you know, because we never really had that discussion.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, the way that I view the 5 big moves concept is what it is. It's a concept at this time. The plan hasn't even been refined. There's still a lot of detail that has to be placed in it, and we're far away from making a decision on anything. I think that, you know, when the 5 big moves was rolled out initially, how many hours did we spend with each council, each board member, really voicing their opinion of the concept at that time? Now, I agree that we should bring it back for discussion if we want further, further input as to, you know, what the concept is. But there's no plan yet. I mean, that's what we're working on.
I'm just asking that we weigh in and vet the 5 big
Yeah,
moves.
I'd be happy to bring it for discussion. I just don't want you to be disappointed that there is not much more meat than you saw in the 26.
I'm not really looking for meat. I just want to make sure that the direction of the building blocks of the RTIP has been discussed by the board, and then input taken from the
We
board.
will be very happy to bring it.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I think that it's really important to remember that the reason we're doing this is that the regional plan wasn't able to meet the standards required by the state. And so the fact that we're proceeding with a state level bill that would allow us more time to do a new plan in order to meet the requirements of the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals that the state has set for us, the board has weighed in on the fact that we want to do that. And so to me, it seems like to say the 5 big moves is basically saying these are concepts that are going to help us meet the requirements of state law for a regional plan. And it seems like it's, unless we want to have a presentation at the board level that goes into more detail on what is in a regional plan, what is a requirement
No,
of a
I just
regional
want the
plan.
5 big moves is what I'm looking at, and I agree, we need to meet the goals of the state.
Right, but to me, it seems like we can get really distracted with other things that are not central. And the central part is what is it that's going to comply? And so
I get that, and I guess my issue is when we're going out, Sandag's going out to all these different groups, councils, and saying, these are the 5 big old moves that we are going forward with. And the board has not said yay or nay to these things.
Georgia.
I'm not interested in hearing the 5 big moves. I know them. I'm interested in getting more information as they get developed to really have a substantial conversation on how to move forward. So I really do not want to spend a single minute to hear the 5 areas and all. So I'm just not going to be supporting this request.
Yeah, I'm in the middle, but I think it might be a good idea to have, even if it's this exact same discussion at the board level, just so all of the board members can feel included in the conversation. I suspect it may, at the end of the conversation may come out the same way it looks like it's stacking up here, but I don't see the harm in agendizing an item.
I don't
kind
know,
of
I'll
flesh it
leave
out.
my motion out there, Dan.
I'm happy to second and see if we can send it on to the board.
Can I just ask the attorney, so what is the process by which something gets on the board's agenda? Is it the chair, or is it the executive committee, or, like in my city, it is the mayor that can set an agenda item?
The executive committee has the delegated authority from the board to approve board of directors' agendas. If an item arises after the executive committee's approval of a board agenda, then the board chair may add an item to that agenda.
Okay.
But generally, it's primarily this group's authority to set that agenda
That's why it comes to
for the
us.
board of directors.
That's why we have this meeting.
And I guess what I'm looking for is, on the 26th, you came out with them, told us what they were, and then went forward with them. We didn't really vet them or go through or say, yes, we like it, these, or we don't.
So Supervisor, I just, you hired us staff to do the work, to get a plan that meets the requirement of what a bright future for the region. And we're looking at ideas. Eventually, we're going to have to approve the plan or disapprove it. I think that, again, the 5 big moves have not changed. The discussion have not changed. There's more data. But I think right now, to even define them is not appropriate, because we're still in the beginning. We're still defining them. We might say the 5 moves will not change, but the context of each one, based on what the vice chair just said regarding the requirement. I'd be happy to also do a one-on-one briefing if that's what you want.
And I've had the one-on-one, but we as a board have not vetted, and it's being presented as this is the Sandag plan. So
this is where I get confused. Vetted meaning approve or disapprove?
Yes.
Or I don't think I can't really put anything in front of you now to approve or disapprove.
Well, I guess it's the 5 big moves, and maybe we want to add, that we have, personally, I like to see that we have more of a balanced plan or building blocks going forward. That includes roads, because 90% of the people are still going to be using high roads, and yet they're not included in these 5 big moves. And so, the fact that, we're presented with something and then staff moves forward with it, to me, it appears that here's what it is, board, and then you go forward with it without board approval.
For whatever work, highways are included more than ever before. One of the 5 big moves in the complete corridor is all about highways and public support. But, it's how you want to take these 5 big moves. There's 5 of them, and the 5 work together as a great plan for the future. I believe it's going to meet our requirements, but it's depending how you take, I think it's very balanced right now, but we'd be happy to talk about it.
So the way that I see this is that our professional staff who we hired brought us the question of, do you want us to proceed with a regional plan that has some risk, that is going to require us to not meet the deadlines, that's going to cost us additional money, float this bill? We said, yes, we want to do that. And now having a plan come forward is basically an operational issue. So these things that are being brought up, I think we have that's the way the system works, is the board makes the policy decisions and then the operational things are run by the professional staff. And so letting them finish their work and not coming in from the side to try to change that, I think is the appropriate division of responsibility. So I don't see the 5 big moves as actually being policy level discussions, because the policy questions, we already made those decisions.
Well, I guess being an old guy, been here a while, we used to set the criteria and the goals for the RTP. So we have not done that. We haven't set, and quite frankly, making the greenhouse gas goals and everything else, for the state goals, we have to do that. Not denying that at all. But it seems like the criteria are the 5 big moves, and then the plan's going to come out of that. So we have not been part of the criteria discussion for what we want to see coming out in the RTP. And I'll be honest with you, if you just want to vote on it and it dies, I'm fine. But
Georgia?
I just want some clarity. I don't know at what point in the agenda do we get to add items to be, because I just feel like this request is a request and we should eventually get to the vote, and we're discussing something that is not even in the agenda, so it's just a point of
I think it came up on
clarification.
add to the.
No, yeah,
In the
I get
context of
that.
discussing
I just-
future agendas.
I
So,
get that.
Mr. Minto.
Okay. Here's my thought on this, because Son and I, we had a one-on-one conversation about this, because a lot of the concern was about the fact that it didn't look like highways were included. And so he's assured me that highways are included. And that's great in a one-on-one conversation. But I also asked, can this come back to the board of directors? Because tell us exactly where those highway improvements or congestion management items are provided in this 5 big moves. And I think that's the key to this is, you know, if it's not presented, it's not there, in my opinion. So if you present it to the board of directors and it's memorialized in that fashion, then it takes away the question about what is presented, what is not presented, what is actually there and what's not there. And I don't know, I think maybe that's kind of where I'm on this, is if it comes back to the board. I don't have to see every single detail in the plan. I don't have to hear what, you know, environmental impact reports have been done, because nothing's been done like that yet, obviously. But if we memorialize the fact that we are going to comply with the Federal Highway Administration, which so far the plan as I see it does not, which means we don't get any more highway dollars. Chances are we might not even get any state highway dollars. The fact that, you know, this board of directors, you know, opted out of, you know, Proposition 111 back in about 1990 or 2000, something like that, and put itself under the federal highway regulations and how it pertains to single occupancy vehicle reduction and congestion management on the freeways. So I haven't heard anything about how any of that complies with law. And I think if we did bring it back, I think those are the areas that we should talk about. Is, okay, we've got this great plan, but how does it really comply with law? Because just like the greenhouse gas emissions, we have to comply with that law. So I think that's where I'm at on this, is I think it just falls short of a comfort level for me that we're going to meet all these needs.
Thanks, John. David?
Yeah, just in response to somewhat of what I'm hearing, you know, maybe there's more information out there, or maybe it's just me being too busy because I'm not one of the most engaged directors that we have. But I think to some of your points, Mayor Minto, is that detail doesn't exist as far as I can tell, which is why I think there's some concern about bringing it back. And we've heard the director say, there are roads in the plan. They're part of the connected corridors. You can't build a connected corridor if you don't have roads. It just doesn't, it's not possible. What the roads are, how much would be invested there, those are all what I think we're going to be arguing over in the future, but I haven't seen a proposal that says what that is, and he's asking for the time to go out and build it. So actually, like the chair, I'm sort of in the middle. I don't mind discussing it, except for the fact that generally I need to leave by noon, so as long as we can keep the meeting moving along, that's great. But I do want to know what they think the objective is, because are any of us going to vote against any one of these 5 big moves? Or are you going to come out and say, I don't want, you know, the next OS, right? I don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense.
Quite frankly, if it was in front of me right as is, I'd vote no. But if there's some massaging and input and dialogue and criteria, I'd be, you know, okay. I'm not trying to throw the whole thing out. I just want the board to be engaged.
Yeah, I understand that.
Then we're going to move on.
I think that the value in reopening the discussion is to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Just as Mr. Minto said, because I think the narrative is being driven by a lot of misinformation that's out there, and I think people have already taken a position where there's still a lot of things that we haven't seen, and so there's already conclusions being drawn based on perceptions, right? So if we can have that discussion, whether it, you know, brings up a bunch of bad stuff again, but if we can have some, you know, solid information where, yes, connected corridors mean improved highways, maybe that'll kind of calm the fires that are out there. And I think that we need to do that as a board. I mean, I really do. I see no value in this board becoming polarized one way or the other, because at the end of the day, we all have to come together and support a plan that's going to have us meet our climate requirements as mandated by the state, and get people moving one way or the other. So for that reason, I'm in favor of placing it on the item for discussion, but again, for discussion, not for decisions.
Well, hang on.
Okay.
So the one thing that the board, you guys are right, we unveiled a concept, and it's just staff's concept of this, for a framework for, how we can develop the plan and kind of organize it. We met off-site, several of us are involved in this plan, and really the whole agency is working on this. We're in the process still mobilizing to get the data to do the analysis. So I think it's good to have that discussion, but we need some time really. We're not going to be able to come back with lines on the map with really, we don't have data right now. I mean, we don't have the data, and we haven't done enough of the analysis. Our general plan is try to come back in the fall, so I don't know if we would have to be open to giving us basically a couple months to work on this. Because right now, if we're having to shift and prepare for a board meeting, and they take a lot of tactical resources that right now we're focused on coming back to putting the meat on the bone.
Well, and I guess I'm just used to having staff present us with something, and we say, yes, we like it, or no, we don't. And then staff moves forward.
But we did that.
Staff presented something, and then we never weighed in on it.
But we all commented for hours, and that's the exact, it would just be a repetition.
But it's the same, but
they
there
don't
was.
have new information.
Well, even at the Transportation Committee last week.
I can help with this because, Supervisor, I made it clear to my team that every board agenda, every committee has an item on the RTP until we have that. So there is an item every week. You can take that item and discuss anything. Every agenda since 2 months ago had an RTP update.
That's an update, okay, but it's still never, okay, I'm just hung up on the fact that this.
That's RTP update. If there's a point to discuss, a question to ask, let us do it. That's what the item is there for. Just to Kim's point, bringing it to the board and putting it something we put already and we discussed for hours, I don't know whether that's helpful. Second, I just, if you allow me, Mr. Chairman. If you ask me right now, with all due respect, so if I take the 5 big move and some of you said, I like 1, 2, and I don't like 4, 5. My job and my team's job is to put a plan that meets the requirement first and foremost. Now, unless you tell me we don't care about the requirements.
I have never said that.
I know you didn't, and I understand totally what you're doing. But my point is, right now, we're really working hard to figure out how we're going to meet the requirement and put a transportation future that means something to this people. And anything without saying yay or nay for any of it is premature in my view. But it's, at the end of the day, it's you can decide. But the item is there every meeting. The item.
Okay, well.
So let me just summarize. I think what you're looking for and what you've made a motion for, and I've seconded, is to put the 5 big moves on the agenda as an action item or potentially an action item. Mary, I think, offered it up as an information item. Do you want to keep it on?
I want another information item.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's not do it.
Okay, well then,
Let's
we'll
vote.
call the vote. All those in favor of putting it on as an action item?
All right.
Opposed? Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Okay.
Where were we?
So right now, that was, I think, a motion on this. You were offering a motion that didn't pass, so you still have to
Yes.
approve some agenda.
John, we need clarity on how this side of the room voted.
They don't.
They don't vote.
They don't vote.
I do. I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you the East County alternate?
Yes, I am.
Seeing you as public safety.
Oh, for Bill Wells.
It's 3-3, right.
Okay.
What do we do, John?
So then we move on to the rest of the
Thank you.
agenda.
Unless we call for the weighted vote. I don't think that's gonna, I'm not gonna do that.
You don't want to do that.
I don't want to do
You don't want me to do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
You want me to do that?
Let's do it. Hey, I'm not going down easy.
Any more coffee?
Arm wrestling. Moving on, Victoria.
And we still need a motion to approve then the board 3A, 3B.
So moved. Second for 3 and 3B.
To vote now with the.
Who's the second?
You still need a second.
Need a second.
Oh,
for
I'll
3B.
second.
How come mine's not registered?
It's effective.
Where's
actually.
mine? Oh, there we are.
And right on schedule, we go to number 4. Hardly. Proposed fiscal year 2020 program budget. Andre and Sandy.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Chairman, morning members of the committee. So we are here today to present the final review of the fiscal year 2020 program budget. So in the draft budget that we presented to you back in March, we took a review of the budget highlights for each of the major program areas. We looked at the expected funding status for fiscal year 2020. We discussed budget amendments such as increased member assessments as well as the use of contingency funds. So in today's report, we'll focus on the changes that we've made from the March draft budget to the proposed final budget. Now again, the proposed budget is $1.36 billion. The majority of it, $926 million, is projected spending on capital improvements, mostly for transit projects. And there's $56.5 million for the overall work program, or the OWP, the planning program, and then $55 million for the regional operations. So Sandy will now kind of look at some of the highlights of the changes that we are proposing between draft and final.
Thanks. Overall, the budget decreased $3.6 million from the draft to final. Details are in attachment 2 or page 21 on your tablets. A few of the highlights of the changes in the planning or OWP budget, it's increasing $4 million, mostly for the state money we're getting for the 2020 census outreach. And the number of projects are carried over funding from 19 to 20. In the operations budget, it increased $800,000, again for carryover of some ARGIS grants and I-15 toll funds. Changes to the capital budget since March are a decrease in 20 spending due to cash flow projections, and a slight increase to the overall capital budget. These overall capital changes include an increase of $6.7 million of SHOP funds for the I-5 HOV Carlsbad project to fund construction of the auxiliary lane in County Road. An increase of $10 million for the State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Penitentiary second construction project due to higher bids being received. Increase of $2.4 million for Transnet bike projects. And then a decrease of $17.3 million for the I-5, I-8 West and North connector improvements that in the draft budget was pending closeout, but it's going to be closed out in the current year. We're also pleased to announce that Caltrans has awarded $1.4 million in planning grants for a few of the projects that are in Chapter 5 of the pending grant section of the budget. This includes $458,000 for the airport transit corridor study. This project was funded with contingency in this budget, and we'll be returning those funds to the contingency to increase the reserve to almost $5 million, or 9% of the fiscal year 20 OWP budget. We're going to be coming back next month to amend those new grants into the 20 budget. Back to Audrey.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. So when the board approved the budget back in March, there was discussion that we needed additional resources for the 2021 regional plan to evaluate, plan, and deliver the type of innovative projects that will be required to meet the region's goals. In addition, the organizational assessment and strategic plan development is underway, and part of the goal for that is to streamline agency operations, identify efficiencies, and potentially restructure teams and processes. So we plan to come back to you sometime in the fall with budget amendments for additional resources that may be needed, as well as identifying the efficiencies. So today the Executive Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve Resolution RTC 2019-04, adopting the proposed final 2020 program budget in substantially the same form as in Attachment 3. So that concludes our comments, and we're available for any questions.
Go. We have no public comment. Any comments or questions?
I did have a question. So you had said $10 million additional for the Otay Mesa East because bids came in higher than expected. What, can you just explain a little bit about what that means exactly? bids for what, and what's, 10 million's a lot, and
So-
I just wanted to understand that better.
So is the bid for the last improvement on State Route 11, the bids came much higher than expected, all of them, so that's the money. And that's not strange for a construction project to come higher
Right.
and negotiate.
Just because of the lack of certainty about what's happening on the Mexico side, I wasn't sure if we're wanting to put a lot of additional capital.
This is actually pure on our side construction
Right.
cost.
Okay, and so we're still committed to that project regardless of what happens on the other side of the border? Or,
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, this is the last segment of the freeway that will tie into an ultimate new border crossing, and it's also a new interchange at,
195.
yes, there,
Yeah.
and a Semper Viva, maybe?
Yeah.
Enrico Fermi. Thank you. Thank you. And so it'll pay for that, and that's always been in the plan, and in the future port of entry is what we're working with the Mexicans and the federal government on to try to figure out how to fund that and how it should be structured and such.
So, Vice Chairman, so regardless of whether we want to be very optimistic about the ordinance at least two, but regardless, this improvement would be needed in our side of the border for the entertainment.
And the cost is just the fact that costs are skyrocketing, continue to skyrocket. Someday, they will level off and go down again, but they still have not.
right.
Georgia.
In the same vein, so it's 10 million, what is the totality of the budget? What is the percentage? Because 10 million sounds like, it's a big number.
It's about 10%.
So it's a 10% increase?
I believe so, we'll check.
Okay.
Jim, what was the total cost? Was it 80 to 199?
That sounds about right, but I will find it out.
Okay.
It's somewhere in that 500-page document that we all have, and I'll find it toward the end of
Yes.
this meeting.
So the total project budget is 132 million.
Okay, thank you. That creates a better picture.
About 8%. Okay.
Yeah.
But the only larger project is the I-5, I-8 west to north connector improvements. That's the one, that has a 17 million additional price tag.
No, so that one, in the draft budget, it was on the pending projects list, and that's the total cost of the project. But they're going to close it out in fiscal year 19 now, so it's no longer in the budget. So that's why the
So it's
overall
just
budget.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
this
see.
is-
That's the opposite direction, so that's better.
That's
Okay, okay, I see. Yeah, that's plus, not minus.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Just-
John?
Yeah, the money that's being spent on the plan, the Big Five plan, and all that stuff, is that in here? Did I miss it, or is it under something that I didn't catch?
Yeah, so that is something that we're evaluating right now. We're working with Ray's team, Mark's team to put together the budget, and we intend to come back sometime in the fall, again, to amend those potential additional resources that we need into the budget.
Is there, do you have even an idea of a guesstimate on what it's going to be?
A guesstimate amount would be something, the budget that we're working on right now is between $5 to $7 million in additional OWD funds.
Okay, and does that include the traveling to, with the roadshow that, as Jim calls it? Is that, because that's a cost that's,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, that includes everything, but remember also that a lot of things we do for the regional transportation plan is also for other stuff, like for the TIP amendment, for the federal.
No, I get that, but with all the questions that have come up over the Big Five moves, I think, for me, I feel more comfortable hearing that what is included in that. Because sometimes, you know, I've seen it before where organizations, oh, well, you know, we drive out and we go put on this presentation, or we do this or the other, and sometimes they don't quantify the work that they're doing, and sometimes it costs money, and that's kind of a secondary even thought to it. But with everything that's going on, I want to make sure that we capture everything that we do regarding that. So that's why I'm asking.
Thanks, John. Anyone else? We need this voted, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Need a motion and a second.
To the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Please vote. Thank you very much. agenda item 5, proposed new board policy, unsolicited proposals and partnership requests. Julie, good to see you.
Thank you. I've talked to you guys in a while.
And we've missed you.
Oh, thank you. So I think since the last time I've talked to you, I've taken on another role for the agency. So as well as being special counsel, I also manage your contracts and procurement division. And so the policy that I'm proposing for you today does tie into that role as well. This is a policy that we think is going to really help attract some great ideas to the agency and provide perhaps some new funding opportunities from the private sector. And so typically the way Sandag does the procurement is we go out and we advertise and solicit for bids or proposals for a particular project or service. But every once in a while we get folks who come to us, firms from the private sector, who have ideas for innovation or for funding opportunities, and what they're bringing to us is what we call an unsolicited proposal. And so right now we have board policies in place to deal with situations where we've initiated the process and solicited bids or proposals, but we don't really have a process in place to guide the way staff reacts to an unsolicited proposal. And so this board policy is something we're bringing to you. We think it provides a good balance of providing a fair and competitive process for dealing with unsolicited proposals, but will attract more of these types of proposals to the agency because they'll know we have a process in place for contending with them. So we do have some good examples of other agencies who've had success with unsolicited proposal policies. One that I'm familiar with is the Denver Transportation, the Regional Transportation District in Denver. Their unsolicited proposal policy has gotten them some proposals that have helped them finance and complete light rail and commuter rail projects. Also closer to home, MTS has had success with using unsolicited proposals to help them with development of a couple of their transit stations, most recently Grantville. So what we're doing here is bringing this policy to you. The second, or excuse me, let me start with Section 1. Section 1 of the policy sort of gives you some definitions and talks about the difference between unsolicited proposals from people who want to have like a consultant contractor relationship with us and unsolicited proposals from those who are wanting to partner with us. And then the sections 2, 3, and 4 talk through the process of how we would get initial feedback, or how a firm could get initial feedback from staff on whether this is something that Sandag might even be interested in. And then they could submit a proposal. The Contracts and Procurement Department would go through to make sure the information that's required in the board policy in sections 3 and 4 is present. It would then go to management at the agency to determine whether in a preliminary review stage this is really something Sandag is worth investing time and effort in doing a more comprehensive evaluation on. Assuming it made it to the comprehensive evaluation stage, a couple things would happen. First of all, you or the board rather would get in the delegated actions report that you get monthly notification on summary of any projects that made it to that stage. Also, we would then need to look at how the project or proposal would overlap with Sandag's needs, do cost analysis, risk analysis, that sort of thing. Assuming it made it to a determination that it was feasible, we would then, in most cases, post it and advertise for 30 days, allowing for competition to occur for that proposal. And then whether we got competition or not, we could then move on and use Sandag's standard policies it already has in place, because then we'd be at a negotiation stage for the project. So I am here today to answer any questions you have about the draft policy, and to ask you if you're prepared to do so, to make a recommendation to the board to approve the board policy, or if not, I can take your comments, questions, any changes you might want, and bring it back to you a second time to the executive committee before it goes to the board. And that's my recommendation.
Thanks, Julie. Comments, questions?
Couple.
Questions?
Has something occurred that brought this to our attention that we would consider a policy? And what was that? And since we're planning and whatnot organization, will we be considering putting in housing at all? Or?
We haven't gotten any unsolicited proposals involving housing at this stage. Unlike MTS, we don't own a lot of property, and so although MTS has gotten proposals for housing as part of projects that they're doing for like the Grantville Station, we haven't gotten that. We have gotten some proposals, and Ray Traynor can elaborate on this if you'd like, but as I understand it, they relate to like smart traffic signal projects, signal prioritization type of projects, and then something regarding some sort of toll lane, is that correct?
The express lanes on 805.
Express lanes on 805. So, so the problem is at this point we don't really have a process that's laid out for the private sector on how Sandag would react to an unsolicited proposal like that.
How have we done it in the past? Because I know there's...
So in the past, we right now have an active policy what we call request for information. So we can send out and say, give us what you got. It's very similar. But this one, we don't have to even put out something. Somebody could come and say, I have an idea for you how to build the facility in North MSA H2. And this is my idea. And not all the time, but sometimes the ideas are so good. Like in Denver, they saved a lot of money to do it. Metro, they get people to say, I can do it for free just to try my technology, that kind of stuff. But we do have right now what we call request for information, which we deployed about a few months ago from the airport. We have the private sector, what do you think about this? And they came back and evaluated that proposal. So this is a step further.
Well, I think my question was more like of a historical, because I mean, people come with ideas all the time. And I was kind of thinking, gee, I never really thought, how did we handle that before, other than, you know, to go straight to a request for information or a bid or whatever it might require. And it seems like this could actually save money.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm going with that. So.
Yes, that's the idea.
Thank you.
Doesn't seem like there's a downside.
So I'll move recommended action.
I do have a question. What is the up to, is there an amount tied to this?
So board policies already have in place, you know, delegations with regard to what your executive director and other staff can do. If it went outside those parameters and we need additional budget or to move things beyond what's delegated to staff, then we would need to come to the executive committee or the board. So if it was over $500,000 to the executive committee, anything, or under, excuse me, under $500,000 to the executive committee, anything over that would go to the board.
Okay.
That sounded kind of like a second.
Sure.
I thought so.
Mayor Blakespear, just to make sure in all candor, if there's a downside to be considered, it's going to take staff time to consider these. But I think Julie would say, in balance, we do feel like the benefit of this is worth that downside.
Great. We have a motion and a second to recommend this to the board. Please vote. Thank you all. Thank you, Julie. Item 6, review committees and working groups. Victoria.
Forgot my name tag.
It's okay, we know you.
Thank you. So board policy policy requires that the executive committee review a list of all of the Sandag committees and working groups to approve any revisions in functions or membership. This report outlines the agency supports 22 different committees. Attachment 1 depicts the relationship between the PAC and its working group. And Attachment 2 lays out the membership responsibilities, years established, frequency of meetings, and the status for each group. 2 working groups were added since last year. The first one is the Airport Connectivity Subcommittee. This group was convened to weigh in on transportation solutions to improve connectivity to the airport. The next group is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Subcommittee. This group was convened to build consensus around the methodologies that will be used to implement the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Plan. This update is being provided to the board at its June 28th meeting, pending any feedback from the executive committee. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Barely gave me time to get up and get water.
I do have.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we're always being mindful of eliminating groups that we find are no longer necessary or are redundant, because it does seem like looking through this, 22 groups is a lot, and it takes staff time to run them. Some of them were established 30 years ago. So, you know, just to, yeah, because I do think that it does seem to me like Sandag does a lot of working groups, and to make sure that we have output that's coming from that that's beneficial to us.
We are looking at that.
Okay, good.
Other comments, questions? Just as an aside and off on a tangent, I've spoken to a couple of you about my plan to reform the RENA committee into a regional transportation plan committee, and that's still in the works. I thought we'd be bringing it sooner, but still working with the mayor's office and putting some meat on the bones of what that's going to be. So just as an FYI.
Which mayor?
Sorry?
Which mayor?
Oh, Mayor Faulkner.
Good one.
I just wondered, because I hadn't heard.
You hadn't heard from me?
It's Mayor Mento, you've not heard.
I just want to know if I'm just as important.
Reminds me of that old Reba McEntire song, Why Haven't I Heard From You? I'll let you answer that yourself. No further questions or comments?
No action is needed.
No action. Okay, good.
That's fine.
Okay, stay where you are. Lori. Legislative status report.
So I'll
Welcome, Lori.
start it off.
Just for everybody to know, Lori finished in the top 10 of the Rock and Roll Marathon and #1 in her age group.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Congratulations.
Nothing but champions here.
So an update on AB 1730, our RTP bill. It passed unanimously out of the Senate Housing Committee last week. Now it moves to the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. After that, it will move on to the Senate floor, and if there are no amendments, then we would go straight to the governor's office for consideration after that. So we are pleased that the bill is moving along the current process as expected. Next up, the state legislature yesterday passed a $215 billion budget. Included in there was $6.2 million for the Del Mar Bluff stabilization. And this really is kudos to the good work between the agency and NCTV to come together and work with the state to ensure that funding for this critical rail stabilization project is maintained and able to begin and move forward with the design process. So that's
On that project, I just, President Pro Tem Atkins is instrumental in making sure that money comes through. And she's going to be holding a press conference in Del Mar today regarding that funding. So if you see President Pro Tem Atkins, please thank you and have her stand up.
Likely, so there's some housing funds that Robin typically will update you guys on, and there was $250 million allocated for cities and counties to plan for new housing. Half would go through Sandag, and the other half would go through the jurisdictions on a formula basis. And then there's also included another $500 million for housing development. The lawmakers are still hashing out the details of the budget bills, and so we're expecting trailer bills to be following subsequently. and we will plan to keep you up to date on what's included for funding in these subsequent quarterly bills as it affects the agency.
So Victoria, on the housing, just, this is good news. So we have, I think our cities will get about 5.7 million. Sandag will get 5.7 million. I want you to know that we are going to design a program. This money will not stay at Sandag. Will go out to cities and the county if they have some good ideas for building housing. So this is good news. And then there is the 500 million that goes directly to the cities and county. There is still, one of the criteria of how this money be given out, how you apply for that money, and we still don't know what the role of the regional agencies like ours will be, but we will let you know as we move forward.
You said it's 5.7, which is for planning or building?
Planning.
Planning.
5.7 for cities planning, 5.7 for Sandag, and we're going to make that development.
I'll just share that in our city of Encinitas this week, we approved our budget and we have allocated $1 million for our arena housing planning. City money, $1 million. So 5.7 million for all 18 jurisdictions. Yeah. It's a lot of money.
All right, so I will give you guys the federal legislative update, and we'll start with some good news. As you all know, we have a full funding grant agreement in place for Midcoast, and just recently we received our FY 2019 apportionment of $100 million. That hit the bank for Sandag, so that's really exciting news for us. In terms of the FY 2020 budget, we're watching this spending bill move its way through the House. We currently got the amendments to the bill yesterday, actually. So we are expecting a vote on the House side of things for the FY 2020 budget, and then we'll need to track it for the Senate side as well before it gets to the conference committee vote. Let's see, just a side note on that, right now we're not seeing the earmark for Midcoast, which is typical, but we expect to see it by the time the bill gets passed. So again, another $100 million. And then in terms, I know last time we spoke, I gave you guys an update on the infrastructure package and the appropriations bill. We still haven't seen much movement on that side of things, and we don't expect to see anything take place with those two items within this year. There's just so many other issues with the investigation and some trade deals going on that we think that we won't see much going on there. Next up, I'll talk about funding opportunities, another exciting thing for Sandag. In mid-April, the USDOT released the Notice of Available Funding for BUILD, which is the Better Utilizing Investment for Leveraging Development. This is the second cycle of BUILD program that we've seen, and Sandag is proposing to apply jointly for 3 projects that will bring to the TC on June 21st for approval, and that's for the Border Innovation Project. We have talked about SR 11, port of entry, and then the North Coast Corridor Technology Strategy, as well as the Del Mar Flood Stabilization, which Victoria mentioned. We just received some additional funding, so it would be leveraging that priority of the states. We anticipate, all 3 projects demonstrate competitiveness by meeting the evaluation criteria. They've identified available non-federal funding will match, and they, most importantly, are shovel-ready projects. These applications are due in by July 15th. We also intend on submitting for another grant application that Ray's team is moving for an innovative mobility project. That application may focus on one component of a region-wide mobile app that would essentially streamline intermodal mobility throughout the region. This application would specifically look at fare integration and social equity considerations, and that application is due on August 6th, and we hope to bring it to the TC for approval as well. And then finally, just wanted to bring this group's attention to a potential ruling out there from the US EPA and US DOT. It's a proposed, it's called the Safe Vehicles ruling.
Over the past couple of months, Sandag, as well as our statewide MPOs and other transportation agencies have been tracking this ruling. And while it's fairly technical, I won't get into that right now. Just essentially, it rolls back our vehicle emission standards for California vehicles, and would essentially make it very difficult for us to program, build, or implement transportation projects in the region and the state. So we're keeping a really close eye on this ruling. We're submitting comment letters and working with our congressional delegation as it moves forward, and we'll certainly keep you guys updated as we hear more.
I don't understand that. Why would we not be able to build?
Let me try to, and Max come in here if you can. So, the administration wanted to roll back the emission standards and the CAFE standard. What that means is, every time we do a regional transportation plan or a TIP amendment, we have to model to see how that's doing regarding the emission. If they roll back, that would require us to develop a whole new emission model called impact model. And that emission model development will take at least 1.5 to 2 years. And so if this were to move forward and be implemented, that means any TIP we cannot model because we don't have the appropriate tools. We have to develop those tools. And I think it's very, very significant. It's significant enough for Air Resources Board to sue the EPA. So I hope it doesn't get resolved in court, because that could take even longer. But it's a very significant issue for us to bring it to you, that we could get to a point, and it could impact things like the mid-coast, like adding things to the mid-coast, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Anything
it is a state, it's something that affects all of the agencies across the state, because California is kind of unique in that we have our own emissions model that we use, and if this ruling goes forward, it could invalidate that model. As Hassan said, these models are, they have to be put together, tested, peer-reviewed, all those sorts of things, and the actions that we take, what we call programming here, to, when we want to modify a particular project or change the budget or change the scope of a project, we run it through this model to show that it's in conformity. And if we can't do that, we could potentially not be able to take programming actions. And so we had a special CTC meeting here last month, California Transportation Commission, where they heard about this. And there's concerns on all sorts of levels, but this is a very specific concern that we have with being able to move any of our ongoing projects forward. So it's something that we're tracking statewide, and we're putting on the record the concerns that we have as a state. And it's not just California, there are several other states that follow our same kinds of procedures. So it's a multi-state concern.
And what makes this complicated is, this is really an administrative action by the administration, so there is nothing we could do. It's not for anything to do. I mean, the state is suing, they could sue, but the administration has the right to take such action. We're hoping that it doesn't get to, okay, here it is, and we'll deal with it, but definitely we're going to have a huge impact on all projects, highway and transit, active transportation. The CTC I presented when they came here last time, and unfortunately there is not agreement between the different state agencies how to approach this. The Air Resources Board went ahead and sued the EPA on this, because they're the one eventually that have to approve the impact model, the emission model. The CTC is very nervous, so we're trying to work statewide in a strategy that does not get us to that, but this could be significant.
Yeah, so it's just counterintuitive to me, because it seems to me that if the federal government is making the decision to roll back emission standards, and yet the states have their own emission standards, as long as our emission standards are stricter, then if they're stricter, I don't understand why.
We should meet the federal.
You still need the model to submit to the federal government that you're meeting the requirement. It's not really about, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna, one other strategy that the regional agencies collectively are looking at are saying, look, if you are gonna implement this rule, can you have a grace period or a phasing in period of it so that we would have time to be able to update the model. That's one of the strategies that's being put forward as a way to deal with it. So that could be, that's just one way to try to protect.
The state standards are stricter.
Yes.
No question about that. But you still need a model that's approved by the federal government and peer reviewed to even use the stricter standards in the state. So this will require us to do a new model. And that's what we're worried about is not having a model, but approving a model for time-wise. So it's going to take 1.5 to 2 years. And that period, we cannot program anything in the state anytime. So that's the concern. While the state is stricter, we still need a tool to evaluate.
I got a question. We already have a model in place, right? We went through a process where we did all the modeling, peer review and everything.
Yes.
Why wouldn't we just resubmit based on that information?
Because they're changing the standard. That model is no longer valid with the new proposal.
I know, I understand what you're saying, but if we're stricter, and being stricter still brings you within compliance, why wouldn't we just submit the same information and get approved? We have the same strict guidelines.
We have to show that.
Same thing, makes sense.
We have to show that. We have to develop this
This is
tool
what
and peer
we're
review
doing.
again. It doesn't make sense from the standpoint that it's stricter, but in this one, you have to develop the tool.
Anything further? You're all good? Information only?
I started with
Our next, we have no further public comment. Our next meeting is Friday, July 12th, 9 a.m. That's it. See y'all.